Namaskar and good morning. I'm Dr. Manish Dabhade, and on behalf of the Indian Futures, I'm extremely delighted to welcome you all today to our panel discussion on Operation Sindoor and India-Pakistan relations. As you're all aware, Operation Sindoor was launched on the night of 6th-7th May and was a response to 22nd April Pahalgam attacks, which really, shook the entire nation with the killing of 25 Indians and one Nepali citizen. And beyond doubts, Operation Sindoor is a roaring success story. It is surely a version of India's shock and awe, and a spectacular display of India's military might, which the world witnessed, and surely our adversary. The satellite images, which are now there in the mainstream media, in the social media, I think have really given a very visible, credible account of what really happened due to Indian strikes on 9 terror camps and 11 air bases, military air bases in Pakistan. 10th May, obviously, we saw Pakistani DGMO reaching out to Indian DGMO, and so-called ceasefire or cessation of hostilities took place. Very importantly, I think on 12th of May, we had Prime Minister Modi address the nation and declaring that India really attacked the heart of Pakistan, and how Operation Sindoor was now India's new counter-terrorism policy and definitely a new normal. But he rightly pointed out that it was only a pause and Operation Sindoor has not ended. New red lines were declared in that Modi doctrine, so-called Modi doctrine. Terror and talks, terror and trade would not go together. Water and blood will not flow together, can't flow together. Another significant point raised was a sure, a definitive no to India, to Pakistan's nuclear blackmail. Cross-border terrorism would now be seen as an act of war and would invite Indian responses entirely driven by Indian choices. I think a very important declaration was also that there would be no differentiation between between the Pakistani state and its terror proxies. And obviously, I think all these events in the last week or so, or more than that, in fact, have tremendous significance, because what we have actually witnessed is a full synergy of political, military, and intelligence and diplomatic leadership. The second point of significance, which I think needs to be flagged, is that unlike in the past, what I see is that India has moved from a doctrine of strategic diffidence to a doctrine of strategic confidence. In fact, the world has seen a leap of strategic imagination. And again, the baseline was, we already had a new baseline post 2016, post 2019. So this is really moving up in terms of strategic imagination. Prime Minister Modi also pointed out very clearly that it was really about deterrence by punishment. So I think I'll leave it at that, and to walk us through this entire, very, very significant sort of a change of strategic matrix between India and Pakistan, and what it means for India-Pakistan relations, what were the ideas, the processes, and what lies ahead after Operation Sindoor. We have with us a stellar cast of speakers, only one can imagine. So we have with us Lieutenant General Khandare, who was only till yesterday the principal military advisor to the Ministry of Defence, has been DG of Defence Intelligence Agency, and also was also military advisor to the National Security Council Secretariat. It's truly an honor to have you with us, sir, today morning. We also have with us Ambassador Ajay Bisaria, who has been former High Commissioner to Pakistan, but also very importantly to Canada. And in fact, his book, Anger Management, is the diplomatic relationship between, the troubled relationship between India and Pakistan, is really one of the foremost primers. Anybody and everybody who's interested in understanding India-Pakistan relations in last 75 years should read. In our university, in my course, we have definitely, it's at the top of a reading list. So great, sir, Ambassador Bisaria, always a pleasure to have you with us. We also have with us Dr. Shalini Chawla, who is one of India's foremost experts on Pakistan. She's a distinguished fellow at CAPS Center for Air Pass Studies, very much in Delhi. So, and again, an author and editor of several volumes on Pakistan. So it's great to have you, I mean, all with us today morning. What I would do is, as we had spoken earlier, we would like you, each one of you, to make opening remarks of 7 to 10 minutes each, bringing your own unique perspective to these discussions. So, with this, I invite Lieutenant General Khandare to give a sort of military perspective on Operation Sindoor and what it means for military equations between India and Pakistan. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Manish, and Jai Hind to all your viewers. And firstly, my compliments to you for getting us all together. You are from JNU, and the kind of nationalist agenda that you've been setting was quite strange for a lot of people to hear that JNU is doing something like this. And I had to tell them that TIF is solely Manish Dabhade's brainchild, and we are happy that you've taken the entire fraternity in a correct direction. Secondly, it's a matter of honor and privilege to be sharing the stage with Ambassador Bisaria and Dr. Shalini. They're both experts of Pakistan, so I feel it proud privilege to be here. This is also a moment to congratulate the armed forces as well as the entire nation, those who believed in us, those who prayed for us, and also for those who did not believe in us. But our congratulations to them also. My heart also reaches out to those people in the border areas who suffered because of the kind of predatory tactics which China always has, not distinguishing between military and non-military targets. So we will come to that. But in the meantime, I just want to mention that militarily, when you look at this, what does it tell you? First high-tech war which India has waged, all three services integrated. No plane has crossed the line of control or the IB. No human being has crossed, whether in the plane or on foot. But you've created so much of pressure, so much of devastation on their terrorist targets. Then they chose to escalate and target our civilian, and then you hit at their military targets with such might that they had to succumb. Now, what do you call this war? You call this a 3-day or a 4-day war? The earlier one which we had thought of was Israel, which had finished everything in a 6-day war. So are we looking at something like this? Possibly, yes. May not be a war, maybe a conflict, but you forced the adversary to seek a ceasefire or cessation of hostilities. The next point here is, what did we use? We used a combination of what was manufactured in India and also something which was not manufactured in India. So you cannot only look at one part of it. So if you look at BrahMos, which is a success and a model of joint venture, this is a stamp of approval on that. So you had BrahMos, which hit hard. You had Akash, which was purely a DRDO show with some help from somewhere. You had your own drones. Again, a combination of what came from outside and what you had on your own. You looked at what was considered to be obsolete air defense in the form of L-70s and Zu-25, Zu-23 air defense guns. People wanted to throw them away. The armed forces, DRDO, the DPSUs, we all worked on it, got them better fuses, got them digital sights, got them all kinds of hydraulic improvements. And then they were the ones who were getting down these smaller drones which don't cost much. So here, a responsible nation, a growing economy also has to consider the affordability of what you use. You cannot be ruined because some iron projectile is thrown at you and you put $1 million missile against it. So you have to have answers for both. We targeted their terrorist camps in a very big way. During the 2016 surgical strikes, we had hit 7 targets, but all along the line of control. There was a lot of activity on media, as always is, and we were being pressurized to show what was the evidence we had. The same thing happened in Balakot. We went deeper. We went and hit Jabbar Top or Balakot using our air, and we were told, look, you hit some trees and some crows. I look at it this time that the armed forces were well prepared with the digital imageries before and after. And the whole world, which had been targeting us for the first 72 hours in media, now seem to understand that we have evidence. So this is a new normal in the military operations also, that evidence will be required. And if you synchronize geospatial capabilities, you can do it. The other part is the information warfare, which is also a part of the new normal now. And false claims that Adampur has been hit and S-400 has been taken out, and the Prime Minister goes there the very next day, and then everybody is looking at it. We are not even talking about it. So that's one more issue that we have to see. The kind of projection before the nation, before the world, looking at the name of Sindoor by itself got the whole nation together. I think masterstroke of the Honorable Prime Minister choosing Sindoor as the name, and then getting two women officers to share the stage with the Foreign Secretary and explain to the world as to what has been done. Now, this is all good, but there are plenty of things which we have to improve upon. We will come to that during the discussion stage also. But what Manish you started with, and here I want to bring out that the nation has moved ahead. Okay, people compare with 1971 and that we broke a country and we created Bangladesh. Give time, this can happen. But if you are to respond, you're not in the action mode, but if you have to respond, then the modalities are different. But if you want to go deeper and you have bigger political objectives, then time has to be given, because a lot of preparation has to be done, because a lot of contingencies are there. So this is one part. Comparing with 71 possibly is a little unfair. You look at Kargil, the kind of political maturity at that point in time, and especially when the Prime Minister felt cheated, having gone to Lahore and getting stabbed in the back. But what was the political maturity at that time? There was a lot of fear that nuclear blackmail seemed to have succeeded, and we were told to restrict ourselves only to those places which had been occupied and not cross the LC. Okay, now you go beyond that. Of Parakram, and this is where there is a lot of thinking that needs to be done. So much of mobilization happened. Over a year we stayed there. We suffered casualties more than what we had suffered in Kargil. But the final go-ahead never came. And in the book, the then Foreign Minister Jaswant Singh has written about strategic restraint. So strategic restraint by piling forces along the border somehow doesn't appeal to people like us. But anyway, they moved on, and then after Op Parakram, if we see the political maturity of being able to go across and hit terrorist launch pads was a departure from the earlier timidity, I would say. Then going and using Air Force, another departure in the right direction. And this one, going well beyond the line of control and hitting as far as Bolari, going to Jacobabad. I think this shows that the calling out of the nuclear blackmail, we have arrived in terms of political maturity and the political objectives and the military objectives. And then the other part where a lot of people talk about the ceasefire part of it, once you've got your military objectives in place, whether they were the terrorist camps, terrorist headquarters, and you also decided to do shock and awe and get their airfields down, their radars out. So what else did you want? So that is a question which people who say that this was the right time to break Pakistan, in my 10 minutes, I think I will end here by just saying that you never break a country to a level where you have problems in future. Look at World War I, what happened in Treaty of Versailles. You can create some other combination, and I think the field is still open. Nobody says that this kind of conflict termination is permanent. And what we have seen here, an excellent control over conflict initiation, conflict management, and maybe temporary conflict termination. I will put a stop to my talk here, and maybe more interesting things will come out in the discussion.
Thank you, General Khandare. I think you really gave a very detailed sort of military analysis of Operation Sindoor and what it means. I think the point about calling out a nuclear blackmail was extremely important, and also how India was under a sort of strategic restraint, which seems now to have been buried by the current political leadership. The very important point about Make in India and what you have essentially seen in military strikes is really a success story of also our own indigenous defense systems. So I think that's brilliantly outlining what it means. So thank you so much. With this, I now invite Ambassador Ajay Bisaria to really give us a sense of the diplomatic minefield which Operation Sindoor also India had to navigate, and what it meant, especially in terms of handling the great powers, dealing with other external players who might have influenced either Indian rationale or Indian responses, and even how Pakistan was looking at other international players. Over to you, Ambassador Bisaria.
Thank you, Manish. Good to be here on your show. Good to be speaking after General Khandare because he's already talked about the military victory, which I think is really the headline of this story. So, what I think I'll do in these 10 minutes is just talk about some seven broad major takeaways from this conflict, particularly putting a lens on the geopolitics and the diplomacy, but also talking of some of the other issues. So the first is to re-emphasize the point that General Khandare made that this was a huge military success, which emphasize the power differential in capacities, military and national, between the two countries, and both offensive and defensive on India's part. You only have to read the Washington Post, New York Times story to get a sense of now that the world is acknowledging, based on satellite imagery, that there was a huge differential both in offense and defense. There was clearly a technological edge for India all through, but an interesting geopolitical angle to this was that it was a collusive battlefield with a Pakistan-China collusion. And the collusion was in the shape of the 80% Chinese weaponry that this conflict provided a lab test or field test for, and Pakistan was deploying them. So while the Chinese posture through the conflict diplomatically was neutral, and the Chinese foreign minister spoke to Minister Jaishankar and so on, the and they didn't do too much at the UN, much less than they would have. The fact is that it was the first uh, India-Pakistan battlefield, which was a collusive one in terms of the equipment that was available, the JC-10 aircraft, the PL-15 missiles, and allegedly even the Chinese boots on the ground in terms of technical help. The second broad point I would say is that India demonstrated a huge battlefield advantage, but along with it, escalation dominance. So, complete domination of the escalation ladder. The first step, of course, was the Pahalgam escalation by Pakistan. But from the second rung of this escalation ladder, India dominated, India set the terms, and till the moment that India decided to de-escalate, it was clear that it was dominance of the escalation ladder. And importantly, there was also a de-escalation posture all through. So each time India climbed a rung, it told Pakistan that there's an off ramp available. If Pakistan does not escalate, India is willing to de-escalate at that point. And I think this is clear to the world that it was a very measured kind of operation. It was a huge attack, as General Khandare said. Never before on 13 terrorist targets and then 11 air bases. But each time Pakistan was given the option to get off. The third point I would make is that the diplomatic strategy, this time of dealing with Pakistan in a crisis, was riding on the back of a military strategy. And, as you said, it was combining the military strategy, the diplomatic strategy, and the political will. But the diplomatic strategy was following the essential military strategy. The kinetic action was the centerpiece of this action, and I think that is new, and that is emphatically a new kind of posture. Uh, Fourthly, and I think you referred to it, the new doctrine has been enunciated. So, in a sense, it was a security posture from 2016, emphasized in 2019, but now solidified. What was a posture has become a doctrine in 2019, which is clearly stated to Pakistan and to the global community that every act of terror will be seen as an act of war if the cross-border linkages of that act are established, and that India would react accordingly. And therefore, the new normal is also that if India reacted with a Balakot plus of Sindoor, it'll be an Sindoor plus in the next operation, should this be coming. Fifthly, I think India met its objectives. And here I want to re-emphasize what General Khandare was saying. India defined its objectives, and those were clear. Those were A, setting accountability and getting justice for those 26 innocents killed, and B, setting up deterrence or reimposing deterrence that may have either eroded or been ignored by Pakistan for its internal reasons. So it succeeded in achieving these two objectives. Now, clearly, the objective was not uh, to solve the Pakistan problem once and for all, to take over POK, or to completely dismantle Pakistan's terrorism infrastructure. It was, you might argue, to degrade that infrastructure. But this was not the purpose, and which is why I think it was a smart escalation, de-escalation instinct which allowed India to contain this conflict. India did not make the mistake that Putin and Netanyahu have made to get embroiled in forever wars because the objectives kept changing all through. The objective was defined, it was achieved. It was clear to the adversary what the objective was. It was emphasized at every ring of the escalation ladder, and the world could hear it. Then I think, in a perverse sense, Pakistan also achieved its objective. And why I say that is we need to nuance that. Pakistan's army chief Asim Munir achieved his objective. Pakistan's people lost. Pakistan's, I would argue, army lost. But Pakistan's army chief won a temporary victory because he did this Pahalgam in the first place for three reasons: regime consolidation, Kashmir internationalization, and perhaps some kind of response to Western insurgencies in Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, which he believes ought to be ascribed to India. So what he achieved was regime consolidation. He did not achieve, I will argue, Kashmir internationalization. That story is over. Nor did he achieve quelling the insurgencies in Balochistan and PTM, because those will become more intense, because their sense would be that Pakistan's army can be beaten, it has clay feet, and they ought to intensify it. So that perhaps objective was lost, but certainly the consolidation of his regime, the narrative of victory, him becoming a hero, is what they achieved. The sixth point I would make is that the template of 2019, Pulwama Balakot, was again in play. Both the military template and the geopolitical template, because Pulwama to Balakot to release of pilot Abhinandan was a 15-day episode. It seemed longer, then it was much shorter. Pahalgam to ceasefire or cessation of hostilities was 20 days. again, a very contained and limited conflict. And in a geopolitical sense, it it also demonstrated, apart from the similarity in how the escalation dynamics worked, the difference only was that we climbed the next ladder of escalation, which we hadn't done. So, if the equivalent of Operation Bandar, which was a Balakot strike, was the strike on 7th May, because Pakistan then didn't escalate or did escalate with Operation Swift Retort, but then climbed down with India's threat of the next level escalation and returned the pilot. So the dynamic changed. Here, Pakistan gave a retaliatory response and met an overwhelming and much harsher response on the 13th air bases on the 10th. So that was a similarity. Now, see the difference between the US posture then and now. It was again Trump 1.0 then, it's Trump 2.0 now. Exactly a similar role was played by the Americans. There was no mediation, quote unquote, no brokering of ceasefire, quote unquote. It was then, as now, uh, Pakistan folding to overwhelming force and not wanting to escalate to the next level, because the next level escalation would have meant a next level severe response. So Pakistan did not want to face it. And we are seeing the evidence now. Even their prime minister is saying that he got a call at midnight. Perhaps he's twisted it to say that we should ask for a cessation in hostilities. The Indians have attacked an airbase. Now, what the US did play was an amplifying role, as did Saudi Arabia, as did all other partners, in amplifying India's message to Pakistan. This is it. And perhaps Pakistan wanting to use them to convey a message. But essentially, it was a DGMO to DGMO conversation that happened in the end. On the morning of 10th May, when Marco Rubio calls up Minister Jaishankar and says that he's spoken to Asim Munir and he wants to fold, he's requesting cessation. He didn't say that, okay, tell him we'll do it. He said, okay, if you really are passing that message, tell the Pakistanis that their DGMO should call our DGMO and ask for this. This is the only channel in play right now. But the interesting thing is the public perception. Now, what happens is that this time, unlike Trump 1.0, he didn't tweet then. You had to wait 4 years for Mike Pompeo's memoirs, Never Gave an Inch, where he says, that night I got a call, and then I spoke to the Indian minister, I spoke to the Pakistani army chief, and then we played a good role in getting it done. He didn't. So, and I say in my book, quoting Mike Pompeo, that perhaps the role of the danger of nuclear escalation was exaggerated. So was the American role exaggerated. But this time, Trump taking us to a new Trumpian world completely changed the game. He announces, even before the two parties announce the ceasefire, he takes full credit. And what this does, everyone in the game understands that this is a American president who doesn't really speak for the US or even for his own administration, because he is an autonomous force. But the clarifications would come later and so on. But what would happen is that the public perception of the US takes a hit in India, because people don't understand the nuances. For them, it is the US claiming it brokered the ceasefire. And the last point, seventh, I'll make is that Kashmir is not internationalized. There are some people beating their breasts about Kashmir being internationalized. Just a few headlines doesn't internationalize Kashmir. Kashmir is going through a certain process of working towards stabilization and normalization since 2019. That will continue. What has been internationalized certainly is Pakistan's terrorism, which will become a major issue. And the related issue of nuclear issue. The good news I understand from this recent conflict was that there was no serious nuclear signaling by Pakistan. There was no movement of nuclear assets. There was no serious, kind of accusation at will, because Pakistan wanted to establish that it has credible deterrence in the conventional sphere. What you did here is nuclear saber rattling, and you need to make a distinction between saber rattling and signaling, which is signaling to the adversary that I may use my nuclear weapons. Saber rattling is you tell the world, oh my God, this is a nuclear flashpoint, please come and help. Otherwise, Kashmir is a nuclear flashpoint. So some of the saber rattling we saw, but we didn't really see signaling, which is a positive thing. What it does is opens up space in case Pakistan makes the mistake of doing it again, of having a sub-conventional conventional response of the kind they saw recently. So let me stop there. We can talk more of Pakistan in the next round.
Thank you, Ambassador Bisaria. I think the seven takeaways was a brilliant way of identifying how geopolitics and diplomacy, in fact, intersected to make Operation Sindoor an outstanding success story. And I think the whole, yes, we also have been seeing debates or conversations about international, in fact, how Kashmir has again grabbed international headlines. But I think you rightly pointed out that there is a difference this time, and we need to be very clear about it. US posture, obviously, we have entered Trump 2.0, and it is much, anything which is coming out there from Truth Social has to be taken with a pinch of salt. That's, I think, a very important marker which we all need to keep in mind always. So thank you again. With this, I now request Dr. Shalini Chawla to really give a sort of Pakistani perspective, how Pakistan, the road to actually Pahalgam, and in fact, what sort of internal dynamics you see playing out during Operation Sindoor. And in fact, both General Khandare and Ambassador Bisaria have also alluded especially to the Pakistani Army's role here. So with this, over to you, Dr. Chawla.
Thank you, Dr. Manish. Thank you for inviting me for this dialogue. And I'm really delighted to share panel with General Khandare and Ambassador Bisaria. Both have been my favorite for very long on this discourse. So a lot has been covered and some brilliant points have been raised by both the speakers. Let me begin with, Ambassador Bisaria has touched upon it, but what potentially was within Pakistan, what led to Pahalgam, and why the Asim Munir and company kind of thought of this adventure or misadventure, whatever we may call it. So what we saw in Pakistan before Pahalgam, and that situation still exists, is obviously economic desperation has been there. Political turmoil was there for a long time. It was settling down, but Imran Khan had managed to tarnish the image of the military quite significantly. They were being called Mir Jafar in the public spaces, and the kind of, names he called and the way the whole population in Pakistan, Imran Khan's fan following went against the military was something very unique, and the military definitely is not ready to take that. What we saw that, there were large number of terror attacks by the TTP and the BLA, and also collaborated terror attacks, and majority of them were happening we saw the targets were the military installations. So that was another factor which was continuously, hitting the image of the military. There has been massive polarization in the country, where you have deep divides into pro Imran Khan and anti military sentiments have been very, very strong. So like Ambassador Bisaria said, that military definitely needed a consolidating factor. One was that, and it was very now keen to revive its image. Before something like this, what we saw right now in military was when we saw some glimpse of it when Osama bin Laden was found in Pakistan, and that's the time we saw the military's image really went down, and we saw a much bigger form right now there. So definitely, image of the military had to be revived. Second part is that one is obviously internationalizing Kashmir, but it was challenging the normalcy in Kashmir Kashmir. The Kashmir could not have been like a nil issue for Pakistan, and that had to be brought back at the international forum. Fourthly, in my mind, what had happened, in the last 4 years, Pakistan has been, struggling to deal with its diminished strategic relevance. And that we saw after 2021, after the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, US focus on the Indo-Pacific strategy. So there was this massive decline in strategic relevance of Pakistan, which it is not used to because it has cherished that relevance for very long. It has cherished the US alliance because of its location, geographic, and the notion that it has created that, it's a stage which is too dangerous to fail. So, and then lastly, definitely a big factor here was that somewhere Asim Munir totally underestimated India's resolve to retaliate. India's extent to retaliate. So they could not think beyond, obviously Balakot happened, but where maybe we did miss the targets and it wasn't, and multiple things got diluted because of the way it ended. So the resolve and the ability was not estimated, and in their own mind, maximum would have been one hit back, and they were ready to deal with it. So this is what, in my mind, led to Pahalgam. Apart, yes, Baluchistan was also a factor. Now, immediately after Pahalgam, what we saw in Pakistan, that obviously the punitive measures by India was announced within 24 hours. And there was this massive narrative building exercise that happened that it's a false flag operation. India has done it itself and we are not responsible. And then, although there was the nuclear signaling did not happen, as Ambassador Bisaria said, but post attack before May 7th, we saw multiple statements coming out raising the threat of nuclear weapons. Multiple interviews came out where Pakistani, policymakers and, speakers were talking about it, that if we are not there, our existence is at stake, and then we would not think twice before using nuclear weapons. And then continuously from the army, we heard the messages of readiness to fight, readiness to go for a conventional conflict. And then we had the support from Turkey, which was very, very prominent. China did not come out all out in support. It talked about it, but it was very well understood that China's support was there. And now after May 9th, the 4 days of conflict, which hit Pakistan very hard, what we saw that we have talked about it, the air dominance. There was this great military, political, diplomatic synergy which was in play. There was also very obvious that Pakistan lacks strategic depth. So there was this strategic imbalance which was very prominent there. We called Pakistan's nuclear bluff because it has really thrived on this narrative of a very low nuclear threshold for decades, and it has used that low nuclear threshold projection in every single crisis in the past. So this was a big change that we did not see it as we were undergoing the conflict. And then we obviously had the new normal and the war doctrine, which General Khandare has talked about it. Now, what do we see in Pakistan is there is this massive narrative of victory, which is definitely needed, and which is why the Pahalgam itself was, conducted. So, and this country obviously, excels in converting defeat into victory. So this is something we see. The narrative of victory has been all over the place, social media, within the country, outside the country. And because narratives definitely drive the national discourses in Pakistan, and we have seen it happening on multiple fronts. Asim Munir has turned into a hero because although we are not able to access the Pakistani newspapers, but whatever we managed to get, I can see the Dawn and News in Pakistan are full of full-page ads with Asim Munir's pictures there, hailing the military. So his image revival of the military is certainly back. Will this now stay? That remains to be seen. But yes, he has managed to revive the image and once again drive the narrative that military is the ultimate guardian of not only the territorial boundaries but ideological boundaries, and that's why that's the ultimate protector there. And this will provide Asim Munir more space to expand his influence. We have already seen how the influence was expanded much more, was in that spree with all the amendments going on. Military had taken pretty much the charge there. His extension is there till 2027, and another extension maybe he's aiming for. What happens, we will see. Now, we also saw in Pakistan in the last year and a half, that all the 4 provinces have been extremely disturbed. Baluchistan, KPK, because of what is happening with TTP and the Pashtun national movements there. Punjab has been disturbed, and military did not enjoy the same kind of clout there. And Sindh, there were massive protests because of the water issue, which military's Green Revolution plans had building of 6 canals, and there were big protests going on there. And now, after Operation Sindoor, the whole narrative in Sindh, which is being floated, that it's not the entire water problem there is because of now the Indus Water Treaties abeyance, which India holds. So the whole narrative the opposition in Sindh is being handled with the India narrative. So that diversion military will cherish, and they will thrive on it, and this will be pushed more and more. In Baluchistan, I feel obviously Operation Pahalgam was a distraction from the crisis that the country was going, but I feel that the Baluch resentment, the crackdown is going to be much more harder. Now we have seen the operation, but I think the crackdown gets much more harder. And another aspect which we will see in the coming time, that military modernization will get prioritized. It's already been on the priority list there. But with the IMF conditionalities and the other issues, we saw it on a little, quieter note, but I think it's going to be revived much more. This is on the internal front. On the external front, the reliance on China is going to go. China has been a little quiet supporter in terms of the fact that it's been doing all the things which Ambassador Bisaria said, the arms being used and the technology assistance that was being provided, but we will see, I think, much more open and much more, input from China coming in. And I think a very important factor which has happened in this whole episode here is that, Pakistan has been struggling a lot in the last, say, 3 years to revive its relationship with the United States. It has been very keen to get that back on track, because somewhere Pakistan's foreign policy gets defined with how its relationship with the United States. And US has made it very clear that we are going to be with you, but we will have cooperation with you on the non-security issues and not on the security issues. So there's not going to be security assistance from United States, but we will cooperate on economy, education, agriculture, climates, etc. But Pakistan has been very keen on the security assistance. So somewhere in their own mind, Operation Sindoor, Pahalgam attack has kind of helped them to get back into the US good books. It's Pakistan's feeling, but we all know that getting into Trump's good book is like it's like just a seesaw. So what Pakistan can claim that, but yes, this is right now giving them a high that they could get the IMF bailout in the middle of the conflict, and then Trump coming and announcing and taking the credit of mediation also gave Pakistan ample space to claim victory. I think that development allowed Pakistan to now say that India wanted the ceasefire and not us. Turkey has been very open and talking about the eternal brotherhood. So we will see much more cooperation with Turkey. Already in the last 3 years, the cooperation has escalated. The defense cooperation, F-16s, Turkey was anyway refurbishing the drones they acquired. And there have been talks about from Pakistan acquiring Turkish Khan. So I think all these things will pick up. So this is on the external and the internal front. Although we have managed to establish our deterrence, but will that deterrence actually stop Pakistan or deter Pakistan from launching a new misadventure? I think that remains a bigger question for us to analyze. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shalini. I think you really put out very well the whole gamut of internal and external arenas within which Pahalgam and you move fast forward to Operation Sindoor took place. Especially how I think a very important questions are about army and the standing of army in Pakistan's governance structures, political structures. So I think that really came out very well, and I think the question of Balochistan also is now gaining much more international attention and traction. So we have to really look at it, and maybe we can come back with the question. So brilliant opening remarks. With this, can I now? There are a couple of questions which I have in mind, and we can go through each speaker. So, General Khandare. In one of the remarks you made was about escalation dominance or escalation dynamics. So can you just, take us through what sort of challenge it posed for India's military planners in terms of climbing the escalation ladder, especially knowing that Pakistan had a lower nuclear threshold. So I think, and which was also alluded to by Dr. Shalini Chawla. So how do you see that? And the bigger question, obviously, is this enough to deter Pakistan from supporting terrorism and its terrorist proxies?
The second part first. Does anything deter Pakistan? No, nothing deters. And one thing for sure, never trust Pakistan or never trust China. Whatever they may be saying, their color of the white flag is never white. So we have to be very clear that you are in a neighborhood where you cannot trust them for whatever they say. And the second part about the escalation ladder. So while we started absolutely clear that we were doing something against the terrorists, and we have always said this is a national statement that talks with Pakistan will happen only on terrorism. We are not going to talk about anything. And second part is it's going to be bilateral. So our policy is very clear in that, and we abided by that. So when we hit them, and thereafter, many people may not know, but immediately after hitting their terrorist headquarters and camps of all three, Lashkar-e-Toiba, the Jaish-e-Mohammed, and Hizbul Mujahideen, Muzaffarabad, Muridke, and Bahawalpur, we logged a message with the DGMO that these are the terrorist camps that we have hit, and we have no further intention of doing anything on this. What was the retort? They chose to climb the escalatory ladder by sending drones and hitting at our border areas civilians. That is Uri, that is Punch. They hit a religious place in Punch. Rajouri, a civil administration official, is killed. So obviously, and then they didn't stop. They went right up to opposite of Kutch. So point I'm making is they chose to ride the escalatory ladder, and then thereafter we went for the military targets from where we thought and we were quite convinced that this is what needs to stop. And even after that, we again gave them a chance, like what Ambassador Bisaria said, there is a ramp. And this time they accepted it and they went into the hurdle of approaching many countries and then trying to get and seeking cessation of hostilities. So we have been able to dominate. But here I want to make an important point. Incidents can be analyzed, but what about future? So if you've been able to call out a nuclear bluff, but there are certain things where your deterrence can be of value from a position of strength, which means militarily you have to start spending more. ORF has come out with a figure. So we need to spend more. That is one. Maybe spending is the wrong word. Investment is the right word. We need to invest more. The other point we have to look at is preparations in a manner to reduce our vulnerabilities or reduce our soft underbelly that are civilians, whether they are in the border areas or whether they are in cities. This time the government did well to call out for civil defense, mock drill, and do many things which the present generation is not actually aware of. So that if you are able to deter from a position of strength to say, whatever you may do, our civilians are safe. So certain governance principles have to change, policies have to change, processes have to change. What I imply by that, whenever a building is built, you have to have a shelter down below. In back in 2013, when there was a lot of activity on the line of control, you'll remember how RT duels and firefights used to take place. And I, as a GOC in Baramulla, faced a similar problem because when we hit hard, the Pakis immediately retaliated by hitting a village known as Churunda. The chief minister then was the present gentleman Omar Abdullah, who had promised that the border villages will get shelters. Creating shelters other than your residential complex is not a good idea. You have to bring in policies to say that you don't have to run anywhere, just get inside your own shelter. We have to learn from what countries did in World War, what Israel does today, what Ukraine does. I think we've got to learn. And this cannot be left only to the military. This has to be a whole of nation approach. And that deterrence is also required so that in the next fight that we have, the escalation to even a nuclear fallout, we will still be in a position to say that you can try whatever you have, but we will still be able to sustain and emerge as winners.
Fantastic, sir. Ambassador Bisaria, there are two questions which and I'm also taking questions which are coming in the chat box here. So one is the question of narrative dominance. So how do you see, India and Pakistan? The narratives. What sort of narratives? Because in India there has been criticism also that the Indian narrative has not gone down, or has not gone in a much more aggressive way compared to Pakistan. So, how do you see that? And the other point is coming back to US and Trump. I think there have been there have always been, especially in the active conflicts between India and Pakistan. Each country has been looking at US to intervene in its favor. So how do you see that? That sort of strategies playing out from the Indian diplomatic point of view, and how Pakistani saw it. Pakistani saw it. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think that's an important question for our post-mortem, our analysis of this. How effective was the strategic communication on the Indian side, and how effective was it in countering the disinformation that came from Pakistan? For Pakistan, this is a very crucial part of the battlefield. The information space, the narrative, the information and disinformation, and it's more disinformation, and that is comes from a context. Pakistan is essentially a propaganda garrison state. It is a Goebbelsian state where it has to persuade its domestic audiences that the relevance of the army is huge because of the threat they face from India and because of the army being the sole savior. So for them, this is almost desperate that they have to get the narratives right. As Shalini said, in the past, the army of Pakistan looks not just for power, it looks for credibility. And when it loses its credibility, it gets very nervous. She listed that as one of the possible reasons where Asim Munir may have even attempted Pahalgam, because he was losing credibility internally. And we saw it after 2011, we saw it after 1971, we've seen it at different points in their history. So I think that's where the instinct comes from. And they have so there will be two aspects to it. One would be the disinformation, information warfare domain, where, for instance, their last DGISPR used to be called Twitter General, because he hired some 5,000 interns whose only job was to spread fake news and lies and make videos and so on. And that is what India was up against. But there is certainly a good reason to review how effective India's information and disinformation was. Having said that, I would say that the strategic communication by India was effective, and in many, many good things to say about that, because compared even to 2019, if you remember Balakot, there was no statement from India after the 3 a.m. strike till about 11:30 in the morning when the foreign secretary came out. So there was a lot of disinformation in that space. The Pakistani DGISPR had tweeted early in the morning. This time, our one-line statement was out the moment the terrorist bases were struck. So this is, and also the whole strategic imagery for national reasons for of having two women of different faiths giving those briefings, of having two women officers of different faiths, of having uh, the nomenclature of Operation Sindoor and so on. So there was a good deal of communication going on. Can we do it better? Yes, of course, we can do it better. Should we have gone to international media during the conflict? You see what Pakistan did. Their ministers were sitting during the conflict in BBC and Sky News, but it was a different story that they were making asses of themselves. They were getting these terrible talking points from Rawalpindi. They knew nothing, and they were mangling those talking points and making fools of themselves. So perhaps wouldn't have been a good idea. I was invited myself, even despite being not part of government, at that point to all the international channels, and I wasn't going because I wasn't clear what was happening. So there is something to that, apart from the fact that the civilians, including the defense minister in Pakistan, know nothing about what's going on. They're unemployed during the war. The conduct of the war is done by the army. They are only told to go defend it without really knowing what's happening. So, but the larger point I would accept is that um, the strategic communication is important, should be done more effectively than we are doing it now. But there's much to commend for what the government did, and setting the global narrative, not necessary immediately during the conflict, but that moment is coming now. You see those excellent two briefings by the DGMOs, uh, putting the facts out there. And if you see the New York Times Wash Post story yesterday, what India is saying, don't believe us. We are telling you the facts. Go to your Maxar images and just see it. Just see who got damaged, what didn't, and nail the lies of the Pakistan DGISPR, who's doing 5 briefings a day, but using video game footage and so on. So, it'll all get nailed once you do that. The second question, I think, was about the US role, right?
Yes, sir. How India and Pakistan were looking at US during the conflict?
Yes. So, again, I spoke about that, Trump 1.0 and Trump 2.0. For India, the US is not uh, uh, in any sense a broker or someone who can mediate. For India, the US is one of the several global partners we have, whom we deploy in the early stages of a conflict to put additional pressure on Pakistan to change its behavior. But there is no illusion in the strategic community that Pakistan folded on the 10th of May because of the overwhelming battering it received, first in the 9 terrorist bases and then in the 11 air bases. It did not fold because the US was actively brokering something. It went to the US, requested it to ask India to have a cessation of hostilities. So for India, it's clear this is the position, and the global community, I must say, and that is the success of diplomacy, supported India. No one said we don't support your fight against terrorism. No one said, oh, first give us proof before you do anything. Your preliminary proof was enough. No one said once the attack was launched that we should condemn India for attacking within Pakistan. There was understanding and support, but an understandable message of de-escalation, saying, okay, you can please do it, but don't do it beyond a point. So I think by and large, the US and Western partners were uh, supportive of India.
Great, sir. Dr. Shalini, one of the points you raised was about Balochistan. Can you expand a bit more about how serious is the Balochistan problem for the Pakistani army? And also, in fact, with the point which is coming out in other, presentations also, and even some questions. In fact, we have today Yogendra Yadav venturing from national politics to international politics and writing about a stable and peaceful Pakistan is in India's national interest. So, how do you see? What sort of challenge does Balochistan present to so-called or add to the instability, or what Ambassador Bisaria regularly calls polycrisis in Pakistan?
Thank you, Dr. Manish. Yeah, Balochistan is obviously a big issue. It adds tremendous chaos there. We have seen the resentment going much. It has escalated in the last 2 3 years because of the instability within Pakistan's military's image being declined, the political chaos there, the economic desperation. It wanted loan from IMF. It was struggling very hard, so its ability to conduct operations was restrained. So these were the factors, but we have seen the aggression going up there because now there is a collaboration between the BLA and the TTP, which is huge, which the BLA did not have before. And because TTP now is a force with the weapons, it claims it has the weapons from Afghanistan, the weapons which were left over by the Americans. It claims that, and we have seen the collaborated attacks. The resentment stays. It is going up in terms of the intensity and the frequency of attacks. Pakistan military, if we all heard Asim Munir's speech just before the Pahalgam attack, and where he referred to Balochistan and said that 1,500 people cannot take Balochistan away from Pakistan. That was, I think, a very strong message for Balochistan, and somewhere a hidden message for India that where they blame India for instigating the whole resentment there. However, I feel that the ability of BLA and ability of this whole movement gets restricted because of its boundaries. It doesn't have the external support. The neighbors that it has is Iran and Afghanistan, and from both sides, it can't get that kind of support. So the Baluch, although it will remain in turmoil, but how much of a difference that turmoil can make in terms of changing the overall dynamics of Pakistan, and hypothetically, which has been talked very often, that it will gain independence. I don't think that's going to happen. So I see a continuation of same instability there. It will keep raising issues for Pakistan. It will keep raising challenges for the Chinese investment there. Gwadar, there will be a turmoil. So the whole potential of the place which Pakistan wants to kind of leverage, that won't be there with this resentment. And I don't see Pakistani policies being, the leadership policies being changing towards Balochistan. So I think it will stay the way it is. And I see a military crackdown in the coming time on Balochistan, because now they have all the rationale to do that, and military is on a different platform. Your second question was about if a stable and what
No,
is.
no. This was about the larger point about how, in fact, that is what I was referring to. That this whole narrative, which is also being discoursed, especially in India, that a peaceful, stable Pakistan is in India's interest. So, knowing generally what is happening, polycrisis in Pakistan, do you think that a weaker Pakistan or an unstable Pakistan India would be better off with that sort of scenario?
I don't think Pakistan is in our interest. So, but the point is, we have seen Pakistan in its stable form. We have seen Pakistan in the acute crisis. We have seen Pakistan in the moderate crisis. I don't think anything changes there in terms of their approach to India goes, because when they are stable, then they have more capacity to think, they have more capacity to expand. And when they have crisis, they seek stability and distraction with India. So I think either ways, it doesn't work well for us. Our approach has to be to how do we deal with this this country? How do we now keep on increasing the cost for Pakistan? How do we keep up that deterrence, and how do we keep a very strong signaling in terms of our ability and resolve to retaliate to their acts of terror? And how do we now create our perform at the diplomatic level and the economic level? How do we keep up all those factors? The momentum keeps to be there, needs to be there. And very importantly, which Ambassador Bisaria talked about, the narrative, where we are working hard now, but how much more can we invest in terms of having the right perception and giving the world the right picture of what is happening within Pakistan and vis-a-vis India.
Fantastic response, Dr. Chawla. Khandare sab, there's a question from IDSA by a dear friend that we have Russian air defense, French jet, and AWACS from other regions of other origins, especially in the Indian satellite sphere. So, what sort of challenge does it pose in terms of integrating all those different systems at the time of conflict?
Two separate issues to be seen. Firstly, if you have a large variety in your inventory, then the blackmail or the leverage which you normally face, it doesn't happen. That is at the higher level, but at the level of integration, that is a problem, or that is a challenge that our own DRDO or DPSUs or the private sector has to overcome. That is to integrate them. Now, in addition to that, what happens? There is a lot of obsolete equipment, but we keep it sustained. We keep it moving. So whether there was a Russian equipment, which possibly they are also not using, but we continue to use it because we need all kinds of solutions. So while people may say that integration is a big problem, for Indian brilliance, that is our software engineers, I think we always overcome that, and there is so much of innovation that has been pushed for. So when we started this Atmanirbhar initiative, so we looked at two things in that. One is indigenization and second is innovation. So innovation mostly comes from the user, and innovators you can see at their best in Israel, because practically every young boy or girl have been in the IDF, and they come back and they immediately join some startup or MSME and give suggestions as to this is what needs to be changed. As regards indigenization, we've made a full list of what all we need to indigenize. And that is the journey that we are taking. But integration, yes, while there will be challenges, but I think our young minds and our scientists, they are finding solutions, and you can see how things have happened. This is an ongoing process, and one can never say that you've arrived at the destination.
Great, sir. Ambassador Bisaria, there is a question on the India-Pakistan ceasefire took place around the same time as US-China trade talks. So, can you see some sort of a connect, a relation between the US-China thaw and the US approach towards India?
No, that will be ascribing too much method to Trump's administration. I see that as only a coincidence. It was just that Trump was having a good Saturday where he felt he had solved the Ukraine crisis, the Gaza crisis, the China deal, and he got a bonanza when they said that the Indians and Pakistanis are probably going to have cessation. So he decided to take credit for that as well. So I don't think there was any design in these things being linked. This was a dynamic of its own that took place, and I don't think there are too many global dots to connect.
I can see Dr. Meena Singh Roy raising her hand. So, over to you, ma'am. Ma'am, please unmute and you can ask your question. Okay, maybe then I don't think she's responding. So, hello. So, this is a question for Dr. Chawla. How long will India have to wait to reoccupy Pakistani occupied Kashmir? And could a fierce Baloch army be a reason for the same?
How long India will have to wait? I think the leadership has to decide. We have started the issue, raising that issue only a few years back. We are talking about it that the talks that we will have bilateral, that too will be only on terrorism and POK. So I think the stance is very clear. This will lead to pressure on Pakistan. This will lead to lowering down their narrative on Kashmir. So this will have an add-on pressure, and also for the international community, I think a reminder of what happened in 1947. But the Baluch resentment, how much can be linked to this? I don't see it right now. But yes, the Baluch resentment, as I said, will remain a problem for Pakistan. It will remain a very weak point there. And then specifically now, it's a very critical area, and we have to see how Pakistan will actually deal with this, because during Operation Sindoor, what we also saw that the strategic imbalance which I talked about, and there was this massive difference that was seen, that while in Pakistan, with like hitting off their air bases from India, the complete Pakistan was in turmoil, because there is a concentration of the assets and the air bases, and there is this lack of strategic depth which has been there, which Pakistan has also talked in the past. So how will it want to now expand its assets and its military infrastructure beyond the heartland which has been concentrated? So in that context, I think Balochistan will become very important. Already we don't know the details, but there have been some reports in the past that a good number of their nuclear assets are in that area, and that's why when we talk about it being a different country, is it not a possibility, because the military will just not let it go. And now we have very deep Chinese engagement in Balochistan, so that also gives military an extra leverage there. So how do we see Pakistan now trying to gather more strategic balance, strategic depth, and will Balochistan in my assessment, is going to playing a very critical role? So how does Pakistan military go with it? That remains to be seen.
Great. So let me now invite Dr. Binas Roy for a very brief, since we have overshot a time, so very brief question, ma'am.
Uh, I'm sorry, my it wasn't getting unmuted. So thank you for a very interesting discussion. I have three questions to all three panelists. First question is to Ambassador Bisaria. It's more diplomatic. You've talked about, I think it was very, very nuanced way you explained everything that has happened. So my question is regarding this trilateral, engagement that we see, China, Pakistan, Turkey. Now, how this is going to be played out in future in diplomatic terms, and if we combine Bangladesh, which also keeps popping up every time, when Pakistan is at least now with the present regime. So how do we deal with this, in future? What do you think are implications for India, and what is the best diplomatic way to deal with this kind of and we know Turkey, so long as Erdogan is there, this will continue. Pro-Pakistani, rattling will continue. So how serious do you think it is, and how diplomatically we can, manage it? Number one. Number two, I have a question to Shalini. You understand Pakistan as far as the internal dynamic is concerned. And I've always felt, the nuisance value of Pakistan is never going to go. You talked about the credibility. I think that's a very important question. How do we really, exploit the internal weaknesses of Pakistan to our advantage? Do you have some three recommendation, or whatever you feel in terms of priority that we can do it? And third, to you, sir, it is more regarding the military preparedness that you talked about. We are in an era of Make in India, and we are doing much in this. You're aware about it. My question is more about the reliable partners that we can think about. For me, Russia and Israel are really a strategic partners if we are looking at the military cooperation and the dimension. How reliable you think United States is, and what is the future, course of steps that India should be prepared for. And I'll stop here. Sorry, Manish, I took a little more time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Meena. Great question on the geopolitics. This is a reality that there could be these alliances. We need to watch them very closely. Pakistan, Turkey, China, Bangladesh. You said there will always be this attempt to forge some newer kind of groupings and direct them against India on the part of Pakistan. At various points, they've also tried to dredge in Russia and so on. So I think our approach should be to watch these carefully, but also to not treat them as a group. And we should have a separate, tailored approach to each. For instance, with Turkey, it's a lot to do with the current Erdogan government. We dealt with Canada that way. We said we are dealing with a errant and dysfunctional Trudeau regime. The moment that went, we saw space open. The moment Erdogan goes, there can be space opening with Turkey. Similarly, we have a certain dynamic going on with China, which is a sort of rapprochement after 4 tough years, which is not a strategic reset. It is a tactical readjustment, but that process is going on, and that is what we should look at. And similarly with Bangladesh, it's just one bit of a rogue regime that has come in. We need to deal with elements of that. Even Pakistan, I think a certain door has opened. We need to be aware that, this is an army chief who has taken Pakistan down this path for his very personal reasons. So what our government is signaling is that, no, we don't want the composite dialogue that you are trying to get, but we are willing to have a dialogue on terrorism. And the conditions of such a dialogue are very clear. We're saying it'll be a strictly bilateral discussion. It'll be on cross-border terrorism. And when that happens, I suspect what India will say, okay, great, let's have this dialogue. But what our asks are, please extradite the Masood Azhar, please extradite Hafiz Saeed, please give us those 26 Indian terrorists who you are giving shelter to. Please dismantle the terrorism and so on. So there will be that conversation. Pakistan might relent. There is an additional element of the conversation that will take place, which we didn't discuss today, which is the Indus Waters Treaty. And now our elements of that conversation will be that talks and terror don't go together, trade and terror don't go together, water and terror don't go together. So that will be a new lever, a new element of this conversation that India can have. So big picture point is, let's deal with each of these issues separately. Let's not worry too much about collusion. I mean, if there is, we need to watch it, but each presents a problem of its own.
Should I go ahead, Dr. Manish?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you, Meena. The question about how do we kind of take advantage, I think we don't need to, because Pakistan is on a self-destruction mode. We have seen, although this country will stay in crisis, and I don't see it going anywhere. But I think for us, in terms of how do we deal with it, how do we take advantage of it, I think the best posture for India is to grow itself. And the more you grow, the more insecure Pakistan will be, because our development of our strength will lead to more insecurity in Pakistan in terms of having parity with India. And in that process of having parity, gaining parity, it totally diverts itself from the social and economic development route, and that's what has been happening for so long. And I think that should be our path. I don't actually believe too much in exploiting the vulnerabilities, but yes, I do believe that our growth will definitely weaken Pakistan, because the focus of Pakistan is going to be seeking parity, and that parity in their own mind comes from conventional military modernization, building their nuclear assets. But the second part here is that the more weak Pakistan is, it kind of now tries to balance it with some kind of act that it did right now in Pahalgam. Now, to how do we deal with that posturing is something I think we have dealt very well. We will overcome and deal with other issues and the lessons that we have drawn from here. We will work on that. I think that part will be strengthened much more. In terms of I think one more biggest vulnerability which we have already taken, we have tried to twist Pakistan arm, and it's going to have long-term repercussion, is what Ambassador Bisaria mentioned, is our position on Indus Water Treaty. You will see the impact in short term and in the long term, and how significant the whole impact is going to be on the economy, on the overall dynamics in Pakistan. So I think the answer here lies in just our growth, Meena. That's what I believe personally.
Thank you, Dr. Shalini, and Ambassador and General Khandare will have the last word.
Thank you. Thank you. Meena, your point is very valid, and I think the bottom line is the reliability factor. How reliable? Firstly, when you are strong, everyone is reliable. When you are weak, you are at the receiving end. So Israel, in your words, very correct. If India and Israel have a good relationship going on, because we have similar threats. We both face terrorism as an existential threat, announced. It's not something below the cover. People have announced very clearly what they want to do with us, what they want to do with Israel. So that is one binding factor. Not only militarily, even diplomatically, you need somebody in that P5. So you've got to tolerate a lot of nonsense at times. Ambassador Bisaria knows more than me. But the point about the bottom line, which you mentioned about USA, who in the right mind would believe that? You look at what they've done to so many countries in the world. They use them, they dumped them. You know that, and it's not one party there, or it's not one leader there. You look at George Bush Jr. when he told us that he wanted us to send military troops to Iraq, which sensibly we refused. And that was quite a decision to take, that we are not going to fight your war. And obviously, if you're going to outsource your own wars to others and then leverage them, and if that is how George Bush was looking at, look at Clinton, he denied us GPS during our Kargil war. Biden was no better, and the present gentleman, obviously, less said the better. So it's not a question of reliability, it's a question of opportunity. If you have the kind of opportunity to be self-reliant to a large extent, I'm not saying 100%, then you're not dependent on anybody, or rather, we should make them dependent on us. That should be the mantra. And here in particular, because a lot of people who are quite utopian, idealistic, they say, the era of war, as the Prime Minister says, so we also say that India should not go to war. You let your people suffer. Is that what you want to do? As long as there is defense industrial complex, which is churning out billions of dollars for any economy, and as long as you have radicals in your neighborhood, you can trust me, you have to be deterring your adversaries from a position of strength and not depend on others. Kissinger summed it up. I don't have to specify. Friend or foe, you will meet your end if you are with the US. So that is one point. And before I close, Manish, very short comment, adding to what Ambassador Bisaria said about narrative warfare, how their politicians made asses of themselves on international media. Not in light humor, but definitely very seriously. I want to say ours are no less, and they made themselves on the internal media, and they started counting on caste and picking out on our brave officers to say, oh, she's a Muslim and this is what has happened. They even targeted a widow from Pahalgam. This is not done. If you have to deter anybody, then you have to be deterring people from military, economics, political, as well as internal cohesion. That is how we should be looking at it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great note to end on. So, thank you very much, General Khandare, Ambassador Bisaria, and Dr. Shalini Chawla. I think it has been an extremely illuminating discussion on various aspects of Operation Sindoor and what it means and their significance for India-Pakistan relations in terms of either looking back or even looking ahead. So it's great. I also want to thank each and every participant who have joined us on a Saturday morning. And I will put out the recording of this conversation very soon on our YouTube channel. And I request all of you to please follow us on X and Facebook for updates on our programs. Previous programs, you might also see recordings of all our events there. So thank you very much and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you so much.
Thank you.